The challenge of blood and honor. The arena was silent. Thousands of aliens stood still, their eyes locked on the tall figure at the center. This was not just a fight. This was a challenge sent across the stars. And now, it was about to begin. King Thasgor of the Graggle Empire stood proudly, wearing black armor made of bone and metal. His voice thundered through the arena. "Any man from any world," he said, "who can defeat my daughter in battle, may take her hand and share my throne. But if you lose, your bones will rot here like the others." His words sent a chill through the crowd. Many warriors had tried. None had lived. At his side stood the one they feared, the savage princess. Her name was Carol. She wore no crown, no soft clothes. Her armor was rough and worn. Her eyes were wild, golden like fire. Scars crossed her arms like trophies. She did not smile. She did not bow. Behind her were the skulls of past challengers. "Step forward if you dare," the king shouted. The crowd waited. Minutes passed. No one moved, and then, from the shadowed gate, a figure walked into the light. He was not tall like the others. He wore no armor, no weapons, just a simple gray shirt, worn boots, and a strange calm in his steps. His skin was pale compared to the Graggle. His eyes were quiet but steady. A murmur rose in the crowd. "Is that a human? He will die fast. He's just a man." Carel's head tilted slightly. She stared at the human, unsure if she should laugh or feel insulted. The king frowned. "Name yourself, human." "My name is Jace," the man said. "I accept your challenge." His voice was calm, like he was asking for water. The king's eyes narrowed. "You bring no blade? No shield?" "I don't need one," Jace said. The arena burst into laughter. Aliens from 10 worlds shouted jokes. Even Carel smirked for the first time. But Jace didn't smile. He looked only at Carel, his eyes sharp. "Then you may die as you are," the king said. "Begin!" A loud gong rang out. Carel didn't wait. She rushed forward like a beast, her spear spinning in her hand. Dust flew under her feet. Her roar echoed through the arena. Jace didn't move. He watched. When she struck, her spear came for his chest, fast and deadly, but Jace stepped aside just enough. The spear missed by inches. Carel blinked. That had never happened before. She swung again, this time harder. Jace ducked. The wind of her strike brushed his hair. Still, he didn't attack. "Fight me," she shouted. Jace said nothing. The crowd was confused. Some shouted for blood. Others began to wonder. Carel growled and moved in again. Her blade danced wild and sharp. Jace moved like water, bending, sliding, never getting hit. Finally, she landed a cut on his arm. A thin line of blood appeared, but Jace didn't even flinch. He looked at her and whispered something in her language. The language of the Graggle. Carel froze. "You speak our tongue?" Jace nodded. "Enough to understand you." She stepped back, her face unreadable. The king stood, his face turning red. "What game is this, a fight, human?" But Jace stayed silent. He never struck first, and each time Carel attacked, he slipped through, like he knew her moves before she made them. This wasn't just a battle, it was something else. Carel felt it too. Her strike slowed. Her eyes searched his face. She had killed many, broken bones, spilled blood, but this man wasn't afraid. And worse, he understood her. When their blades finally locked, her spear against his bare hand, he whispered again. "You don't want this," he said. "I see it in your eyes." Her grip tightened. "You know nothing about me." But her voice had softened. Jace let go and stepped back. The crowd didn't know what to feel. It wasn't the battle they expected. It wasn't blood and victory. It was confusion, tension, something ancient and quiet. The gong rang again, ending the first round. The king looked down, eyes burning. "You live, human," he said. "For now." Jace nodded once. "I'll be back tomorrow." Carel said nothing. She watched him turn and walk away, slow, calm, and alive. And for the first time in her life, the savage princess felt something strange. She wanted to know who this man truly was. The human enters the fire. The next day, the arena was packed even earlier. Creatures from distant moons had flown in. Nobles, warriors, merchants, even spies came just to witness what many called a joke. The human who dared to challenge the savage princess and didn't die. But Jace wasn't a joke anymore. Some believed he had used magic. Others thought he got lucky. Most believed the princess would not hold back this time. She would crush him, tear him open, and remind everyone why she was undefeated. Karel hadn't slept much. The night echoed with questions in her mind, not about her own strength. She knew that. It was the man's eyes, his silence, the way he moved like water and fire at the same time. He wasn't fast, he wasn't strong, but somehow, she never touched his soul, and that scared her. As the gong rang again, the gates opened. The human stepped forward. This time he wore gloves, light armor over his chest, nothing too heavy. Still no weapon, no sword, no shield. Just that same quiet stare that cut deeper than any blade. Carol waited in the center, her new blade resting on her shoulder. She had chosen a heavier one today, not for honor, for destruction. "You return," she said, her voice lower than before. "I said I would," Jace replied, walking to the mark on the floor. "Most don't," she said, circling him. "Most crawl away, broken inside. Then I'm not like most." A spark danced in her golden eyes. "Prove it," she whispered, and she charged. But this time Jace didn't step back. He leaned forward and met her head on. Her blade came in a wide swing. Jace dropped low, his foot sweeping across the dust, forcing her to leap back. Their bodies passed like wind over fire, so close yet untouched. The crowd gasped. It wasn't luck. It was rhythm. Carol swung again, faster, sharper. She forced him to the edge of the arena. But Jace didn't stumble. He danced, light on his feet, his breath steady. It was like he had trained not to fight, but to feel her anger. Every time she tried to overpower him, he used it against her. Every scream from the crowd, every stomp of her foot. He turned into silence. Then, something strange happened. As Carel lunged forward, Jace stepped in too, and placed his hand gently on her shoulder, spinning her aside with no pain, no force. She landed on her feet, but it wasn't just the move that shocked her. It was the feeling. A human had touched her. Not with fear, not with lust, not with rage, but with respect. She froze. "You fight because they made you," Jace said, breathing slowly, "but you don't enjoy it." Her fist clenched. "You don't know anything about me." "I know your strikes miss on purpose," he said. She looked at him, stunned. "What?" "You held back," Jace said softly. "Twice. Yesterday, and now." Carel felt her heart race, not from battle, but from something she didn't understand. The crowd didn't hear their words. They only saw a pause. Two fighters circling each other like wolves, but not to kill. To understand. "Why are you really here?" Carel asked, her voice quiet. "Not for your hand," Jace said. She raised an eyebrow. "Then why face me?" "Because your father turns you into a weapon," he said. "And weapons deserve to choose whether they want to fight." For a moment, the noise faded. Her blade lowered. Her hands opened. She looked at him, truly looked, not as prey, not as a stranger, but as a man who saw her pain before her strength. No one had ever done that. And then, a whistle rang. From the royal box, the king rose. His voice was sharp and filled with fury. "Stop this," he shouted. "This is not a dance. This is not a speech. This is a test of war. Show me blood." Carel's hands tightened around her sword again. Jace stood still. "I'll give them what they want," she said, eyes cold again. "Then hit me," Jace whispered. "Hit me like you mean it." And she did. Her blade roared through the air, crashing down on his shoulder. Jace blocked it with his arm. A sickening crack echoed through the arena. He dropped to one knee. Blood poured. The crowd roared. But Jace smiled just a little. "Good," he said. "Now you've started." Karel stood over him, breathing hard, her blade still raised. But something had changed. For the first time, she didn't want to win. She wanted to know more. Her fury ignites. The blood on his shoulder was real, thick, red, and spreading. Jace stayed on one knee, his hand gripping the wound. The strike had been powerful, more powerful than any she had delivered before. But he didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't even look at the crowd. He looked up at her. Karel's chest rose and fell. Her blade still hovered in the air, waiting for the second blow. She had been trained to finish quickly. Leave no space for doubt. Her father always said mercy is the seed of rebellion, but she didn't move. Because Jace didn't look broken. He looked alive. And worse, he looked proud. "That's it," he whispered, pain dripping from his voice. "That's your real strength. Not the performance. Not the act." Karel's grip tightened. "You want to die, don't you?" "No," Jace said, slowly rising to his feet. "I want you to wake up." The words hit her harder than her own strike. She growled and slashed again, aiming lower this time. Jace barely dodged. The blade ripped through his shirt, opening a second cut near his ribs. Blood again. Fresh and hot. The crowd cheered. Aliens from 10 systems roared her name. "Karel! Karel! Karel!" But her face showed no joy. Her heart wasn't steady anymore. It beat like a storm, not from rage but confusion. "Why won't you fight me properly?" she shouted. Jace wiped blood from his chin and stepped forward. "Because you don't want to kill me." Karel screamed and launched at him again. Jace braced himself, catching her wrist mid-swing. It wasn't enough to stop her, but just enough to slow her down. Their faces were inches apart. "Say it," he said softly. "Say you don't want to do this." Her eyes burned gold. Her muscles shook. For a split second her lips parted. Then she pulled away, breathing hard. "You think you understand me? You know nothing." Jace didn't follow. He stood still, blood dripping to the ground. "I know what it's like to be used." Karel stopped moving. "I was a soldier once," Jace said. "Not for glory, not for honor, just orders." They pointed. I obeyed. Killed people I never knew. Watched my friends die. And when I couldn't fight anymore, they threw me away. His voice was steady. Not proud, not weak. Just truth. "You think being strong means killing," Jace continued. "But strength is choosing not to. And I think, deep down, you know that." The crowd didn't understand the words. They only saw that the human had stopped fighting again. Some shouted for his death. Others begged the princess to finish it. Even the king rose once more, shouting across the arena. "Daughter, do not waste your time. Crush him and be done with it." Karel lowered her blade. "Is that all I am? To him?" she whispered. Jace nodded. "A tool. A weapon. But you're more than that. I see it in your eyes." For the first time in her life, Karel felt something rise in her throat. Not anger. Not hate. Something soft. Something that frightened her more than war. Tears. She turned quickly, hiding her face. But the king had seen enough. "This trial is over," he bellowed. "The human dies, not by your hand, then by mine." A gate opened near the throne. A hulking beast, armored and drooling, charged into the arena. It was part machine, part flesh, the Emperor's executioner. No honor, just death. Jace took a step back. His body was too hurt to run, too weak to fight again. The beast roared and raised a blade twice the size of Jace. But it never fell, because something crashed into it mid-sprint, fast and brutal. Karel. She tackled the beast to the ground, her own blade cutting deep into its side. It howled in pain, thrashing and clawing at her. She didn't care. She moved like fire, striking again and again until it stopped breathing. Blood soaked her armor, but she stood. Then slowly, she turned to face her father. The crowd was silent. "Make my own choice," she said, her voice like thunder. "The trial is not over, not until he says it is." Jace, barely standing, met her eyes. She didn't look like a savage anymore. She looked like a woman ready to fight for herself. Breaking the beast, the crowd didn't move. Not a word, not a breath. Even the air seemed afraid to make a sound. Carol stood over the dead executioner, blood still dripping from her blade. Not human blood. Not her own, but the blood of a beast her father had sent to kill Jace for her. She had made her choice, and now, all of them had to live with it. The Emperor's hands curled into fists. Never before had she disobeyed him in public. Never before had she turned her back on the throne. Not once in her entire life. But now, before all of Graggle's people, she had broken the chain. And she had broken it for a human. Slowly, she walked back toward Jace. He was kneeling again. His breath was rough, his face pale. He had lost too much blood. Every part of him ached, but he looked up when she came close. Carel dropped her sword in the dust between them. "You wanted truth," she said. "So here it is." He blinked. "I'm listening. My father raised me for war. From the moment I could walk, I was trained to kill. I never played, I never sang, only fought. When other girls learned to dance, I learned to break bones. When they braided hair, I braided steel. And when they slept, I bled in the sand to make him proud." Jace didn't say anything. He simply listened. And that silence felt like a gift. He told me love was weakness. He said no one would ever love me, only fear me. So I became what he wanted. I killed. I destroyed. And they all clapped. She turned to the crowd. "You all clapped." The crowd looked away. "But I'm tired, Jace," she whispered. "I'm tired of being a monster in armor." Jace nodded slowly. "Then take it off," he said. Carol looked confused. "What?" "Take off the armor," Jace said, his voice soft but steady. "Not here. Not now. But one day. For yourself. Not for me." She stared at him, really stared. And then slowly she knelt in front of him. The savage princess once feared across worlds, now kneeling before a bleeding human. "You've already defeated me," she said. Jace laughed a little, even through the pain. "I don't think that's what your father had in mind." From above, the Emperor shouted again. "Enough of this disgrace. Guards, seize them both." Gates opened across the arena. Armored soldiers poured in. Jace tried to stand, but stumbled. Carel caught him with one hand, pulling him close. "They won't take you," she said. "Not while I breathe." Soldiers came fast. Blades out. No time to think. Carel roared. With one swift move, she grabbed her sword again and spun. The first two guards flew back, armor shattered. The next wave hesitated. This wasn't just a warrior anymore. This was a woman fighting with purpose. One soldier aimed for Jace. She stepped in the way, taking the hit across her back. Blood soaked through her armor, but she didn't stop. She turned and ended him with one blow. "You don't have to do this," Jace said weakly. "I'm not doing it for you," she said. "I'm doing it for me." The last few guards backed away, unsure if they were ready to die for the Emperor's pride. A voice rang, out from the crowd. "Let them be," someone shouted. Others joined. "She won the fight. He didn't lose. They deserve their choice." In the royal box, the Emperor watched the crowd begin to shift. Something he had ruled through fear was now turning, slowly, into rebellion. He clenched his teeth. "This is not over," he hissed. Carel turned to face him. "No," she said, "but it's finally begun." She dropped her sword again, not in surrender but in freedom, and she turned back to Jace, placing one hand on his cheek. "Can you walk?" she asked. "Not far," he admitted. "Then I'll carry you." And she did. The crowd parted as the princess lifted the wounded human in her arms and walked out of the arena. Not as a trophy, not as a servant, but as something else, something new, something free. The Emperor's rage. The doors of the Colosseum closed behind them with a loud final thud. The air inside had been heavy with blood and war cries, but outside, the silence was worse. 100 armored guards stood still, watching the princess carry the broken human through the royal path. None of them moved. Not one dared stop her. They had seen her rage, and they had seen her mercy. Carol walked with slow but powerful steps. Jace's weight wasn't the heaviest thing in her arms. It was the choice she had made, one that could never be taken back. She took him to the old healer's hall, a quiet place long forgotten behind the palace gardens. It had once treated injured nobles, but now it was empty, a place of dust and silence. No one would follow them here. Not yet. She laid him down gently on the stone bed. Jace groaned, his eyes fluttering open. "You still alive?" she asked. "Barely," he smiled weakly. "But still prettier than your pet executioner." She couldn't help it. A small laugh escaped her lips. Just for a second. It felt strange in her chest. Warm, unfamiliar. "You're lucky I like stubborn idiots," she muttered, sitting beside him. He looked at her through tired eyes. "You know what happens now, right?" She nodded. "He'll try to kill us both." Back in the palace, the Emperor was already in a fury unlike any before. Faces shattered, advisors bowed in terror, and the ground itself seemed to tremble as he stormed through the hallways. "My own blood," he roared, "kneeling for a human, siding with our enemy, protecting him like some mate?" The council stood silent, afraid to speak, but one old voice dared to rise. "She didn't lose, my king," the advisor said softly. And the crowd, they saw something powerful. The Emperor turned on him. "They saw weakness," he barked. "They saw my daughter choosing a human over her throne, over me." He pointed toward the arena, now empty. She was meant to be feared. She was the beast of this empire. Now she's what, a hero? A lover? He spat the word like poison. But deep inside, something darker burned in his chest. Fear. Not of his daughter, not of Jace, but of the idea that others might follow her example. One seed of rebellion was all it took. "Double the guards," he said. "If anyone speaks her name, cut their tongue. If anyone questions my rule, burn their house. And find them. Find her and the human. And bring me their heads." Back in the healer's hall, Jace sat up with effort. Carol wrapped his shoulder in a clean cloth, her hands rough but careful. "You should rest," she said. "I should run," he replied. "But my legs don't agree." She stared at the wall for a long time before speaking. "I've been feared since I was 10. They made me fight older warriors just to earn food. I was forced to kill my own trainer when I turned 16, because he said I was strong enough." Jace's eyes didn't leave her. "You don't have to be that anymore." "And what if that's all I am?" she asked, her voice low. "Then I'll help you become something else," he said. She looked at him, really looked, not as a stranger, not as an opponent, but as a man who didn't flinch even when she bled him open. "Why did you come here?" she asked. "Why enter the challenge at all?" Jace leaned back against the wall. "Because I heard a rumor," he said. "A whisper in a back alley bar on a dying moon. They said the Emperor's daughter wasn't a monster, just a prisoner in armor. And you believe that?" she asked. He nodded. "I had to." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed outside the hall. Many. Heavy. Organized. They were no longer safe. Carel grabbed her sword. Jace pushed himself upright, wincing. "You need to go," she said, "not without you." "I'll fight them off," she said. "You escape." "And leave you to die?" Jace shook his head. "I didn't come all this way just to watch you. Fall now." She hesitated. Then, slowly, something changed in her eyes. Not rage. Not fire. Something soft. Something close to trust. "Then we run," she said. "Together," he added. And for the first time in her life, Carol didn't walk toward war. She turned away from it. With Jace beside her, she stepped into the night, not as a warrior, not as a weapon, but as a woman finally choosing her own path. Exile or war, the sky above the palace world was deep purple now, lit only by the glow of 3 moons. In the darkness, the streets of the imperial city held their breath. Guards in black armor moved like shadows, kicking down doors, dragging people out, demanding answers. They searched every corner, every ship, every hiding place. And yet, no trace. Because Carell and Jace were no longer within the walls. They had fled through forgotten tunnels beneath the healer's hall. Carell remembered the paths from when she was a child, before her father, locked them all away and sealed her fate. They moved slowly. Jace's wounds burned with each step, but he said nothing. Carell offered to carry him again, but he refused. "I have to walk on my own," he said. "If I'm going to leave with you, I want it to be standing." She nodded. The respect in her eyes grew. Hours passed. They reached the outer valley, where old ships rusted beneath silver trees. The Empire had abandoned these launch bays decades ago, but one small craft remained hidden under roots and dust, untouched. Carell brushed off the vines. "Think it still flies?" Jace asked, voice dry. "We'll find out." They climbed in. Carell took the pilot seat. Jace leaned back in silence. The ship hummed to life, slow and weak at first, but then stronger, like it still remembered what it was made for. As the engines warmed, Jace looked out the cracked window. "If we leave now," he said, "there's no going back." Carell didn't take her eyes off the controls. "I'm not going back, not ever." Then quietly she added, "Are you?" Jace turned his gaze to her. His voice was soft. "Wherever you go, I go." For a moment her hands paused on the controls. Then she pushed forward. The ship lifted from the ground. Beneath them, alarms rang across the city. They were seen, and they were gone. The escape shook the Empire. Messages spread like fire through every comm channel. The princess had fled with a human. The king was enraged, and worse, the people were beginning to speak her name, not with fear, but with hope. She spared him. She stood up to the throne. She chose her path. The Emperor couldn't ignore it anymore. In the high war chamber, his generals surrounded him. "We must crush them," one barked. "Send a dreadnought after their ship." "No," another said, voice lower. "If we attack now, we risk war. The human fleets will answer. They're already watching." "They wouldn't risk full war for one soldier," the Emperor growled, but the general looked him in the eye. "He's not just a soldier anymore," he said. "He's a symbol. So is she." The Emperor paced. His rage was burning everything inside. But he knew the truth. He ruled with fear, and fear was cracking. "Then what do you suggest?" he asked. A silence fell. And then, the voice of an old strategist, a woman who had survived 3 rebellions, spoke from the shadows. "Let them go." Everyone turned. "Exile them," she said. "No fleet, no war, no glory, just silence. They will fade. The fire will die if no one fans it." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. He hated it, but deep down, he knew fighting now would make martyrs. And martyrs had a way of living forever. After a long pause, he nodded. "Send the word," he said. "They are no longer welcome in the Empire. If they return, they die." In deep space, Carol's ship drifted toward the edge of a system with no name. The stars were brighter here, quieter. Inside, Jace slept, finally resting without pain. Carol sat beside him, not in armor anymore, just in simple clothes, worn and free. She held a small piece of metal in her hands, once a sharp blade, now broken. She had carried it since she was 12. Today she dropped it into the storage bay and walked away. She looked at Jace, who stirred in his sleep. "We're not safe," she whispered to herself. "But we're free." And in that moment, for the first time in her life, she smiled. Not for war, not for duty, just for herself. A crown of fire and choice. 2 months had passed since they left the Empire. 2 months without orders, without battle cries, without blood on their hands. The stars were different now, brighter, open, and wide. Jace and Carol moved from one quiet world to another, keeping low, fixing their ship bit by bit. Some places welcomed them. Others whispered behind their backs. A Graggle warrior traveling with a human. That alone sparked enough gossip to burn a city. But they kept moving, not because they were running, but because they were becoming. One evening on a small desert moon, they stopped for repairs. Jace sat outside the ship watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. His shoulders still ached from time to time, but he didn't complain. His hands were stronger now, his heart lighter. Carol walked out, holding 2 cups of steaming root tea. She wore soft clothes now, a faded jacket, worn boots, her long black hair tied behind her head. No armor, no symbols of war. She sat beside him and handed him a cup. "Tastes awful," she warned. Jace took a sip. He coughed. "You weren't kidding." She smirked. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Finally, she spoke. "You ever think about going back?" Jace stared at the sky. "Sometimes. Not to fight, just to see what they became without us." Carell nodded. "My father's grip is slipping. Word spreads faster than fear now." "What do they say?" "That the savage princess didn't fall," she said. "She woke up." Jace smiled. "That's a good story." She looked down at her hands. "But it's not over, is it?" He glanced at her. "Do you want it to be?" Carell didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled something out from her coat, a small disc-shaped device. Old and worn. She pressed it. A hologram flickered to life. Not of war, not of blood. A planet. Her homeworld. Green lands, golden skies, children playing near silver rivers. Not soldiers. Not fear. "This is what it looked like before the Empire turned it into a fortress," she said softly. Jace watched in silence. "If we go back," she continued, "not to destroy, not to fight, but to build something new. Do you think people will follow?" He looked at her, not as the woman who nearly killed him, not as the warrior who tore through empires, but as someone brave enough to start again. "Yes," he said. "If you lead, they'll follow." Carell looked down, then reached out slowly, placing her hand over his. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But it was real. They didn't return as invaders. They returned as a whisper. First to broken planets the Empire had abandoned. Then to the old outposts where soldiers lived in silence, tired of the war. Then to cities where people remembered. Carell's roar not with fear, but with respect. They didn't bring weapons. They brought choice, and people listened. Former enemies, tired warriors, even humans who once feared the Graggle. They all began to follow, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The Emperor heard, of course. From his throne, now surrounded by nervous guards and empty halls, he watched his control crumble like dust. He ordered assassins. They failed. He sent messages. They were ignored. And finally, he said nothing. Because silence was the only power he had left. Years later, in a hall built from both stone and starlight, a new leader stood before a gathering of species. She wore no crown. She ruled no empire, but she had the respect of worlds. Carol. Her scars were still there, but now they were not trophies. They were reminders. And beside her stood Jace, not her prize, not her protector, but her equal. On the night of their greatest gathering, a small girl approached Carol in the crowd. "Is it true?" she asked. "You were the savage princess?" Carell knelt down. "I was." "Why aren't you now?" Carell smiled. "Because a human once told me I didn't have to be." The girl blinked. "Did he win the challenge?" Jace chuckled behind her. Carol looked over her shoulder, her eyes soft. No, she said. He didn't win. Then she leaned closer to the girl. He changed the rules.